component at the end of the session. So please type your questions in the chat box and Lisa will get to them after her presentation. And in addition, we'll share the slide deck and some further information around member benefits and what we're doing at ACS Canberra branch for your information if you want to get involved. I also encourage you to reply back to us and let us know if there are any other topics that are of interest for you and what you'd like us to see us delivering here in ACS Canberra over the next 6 to 12 months. So to get into it, I will start with some further information around Lisa Bouari, today's speaker, Executive Director of Outthought, before she starts her presentation. Lisa is an Executive Director and owner of Outthought, a company that delivers AI assistance and natural language processing-based systems to clients in the commercial and public sectors. She has over 15 years of experience in the design and execution of machine learning, business analytics, and cognitive computing solutions. She has been twice awarded Architect of the Year in Asia Pacific by IBM for outstanding achievements and was most recently awarded ARN 2018 Woman in ICT Innovator of the Year. As a regular advisor to the C-suite, technology panelists and conference chairs, her company was recently shortlisted for the 2018 CIO Magazine Top 10 AI Technology Solution Providers. Lisa is passionate and real when it comes to what's possible and what's not with AI and enjoys learning from the successes and failures that these new, often overhyped technologies bring to the market. Please join me to welcome our presenter today, Lisa Bouari.
Thank you. And I'm so grateful to be presenting this session today. A lot of you have attended my other sessions and I've prepared a whole lot of new and fresh content for you, so I hope that you find it of value. If any questions come up while I'm chatting, just put them in the Q&A box and I'll circle back to those at the end of the session. These are my details. If you've got any further questions after the session or if you're interested in connecting, I promise it will be me and not a bot that responds to you. And please make sure you follow and add me on LinkedIn, and also follow Outthought Virtual Assistants. The links are there. We post a lot of this content online and it's often a great source for people to stay connected to this world of all the stuff that we're presenting. So I went out to my network a few months ago now and asked what they wanted to hear about, and they came back with a whole bunch of topics, a pretty varied bunch of topics, but I decided it would be more relevant to present on what my connections and my network want to know about rather than what I think they want to know about. So these are the topics that I'll be going through today, and I hope that you enjoy them. Some of my topics have a little bit of assumed knowledge, but I'll also be covering a couple of foundational things too, because there's quite a varied participant list. We've got, I think, 142 people now on, so a pretty big variation in knowledge and depth in terms of virtual assistants. Some people might be very new to them and some might be a little bit more advanced. So I published this slide, I presented this slide a few years ago now, and at the time Gartner was saying that by 2020, which here it is already upon us, it seemed so futuristic a few years ago, that a quarter of companies would be using chatbots in customer service. At the time, I thought this was quite ambitious because certainly 25% of the customers that I knew about were not using this technology or even really thinking about it. So I did think, though, it was possible. And what we've recently seen presented from Capgemini is that actually quite a large number of organizations now in 2020, so this was published at the end of last year, are actually starting to deploy this virtual assistant technology. Now, just to caveat this chart a little bit, this is actually including proof of concepts, pilots, and also productionized systems. So there's still a lot of organizations in these lists who are, I guess, dabbling and still really testing out the technology and where they think it's going to be most powerful for them. But I do find this really refreshing, and I was really excited to see these results when they were published. That report, you can go and just Google the Capgemini virtual assistants report. You'll see it. They've got heaps of interesting info in there. It's quite heavily voice focused though this year. I'm not so much focused on the voice space, but definitely interesting one to go and look at. So what are organizations currently using? Well, I can't talk to the masses out there. There's a pretty good range of chatbots out there that you can go and find. Often they'll be within organizations that you're currently using, so like your bank or your insurance provider. But the most common ones that I'm certainly seeing in the market, and the ones that we're most being asked to design and create for people, are these ones. So the first one is the frequently asked question chatbot or virtual assistant. And this one is where their organizations are essentially using these to automate around, starting a low percentage, but up to 70 to 80% of their customers frequently asked questions. This is a really common first use case to start with. It's probably one of the lower risk ones if it's done correctly, but it also can have some really good rewards in terms of automating a whole lot of low-level customer support inquiries that are highly repetitive. The second one is around lead generation. Lead generation is more about when organizations are using virtual assistants to collect information from people coming to their site. So rather than someone coming to your site and leaving, the bots are engaging these people in conversation, often collecting details from them, and essentially allowing that organization to serve that customer better and be able to connect with them in the future. And understand what it is that's important to them. We've also seen quite a lot of triage. There's varying degrees of this. The simplest ones that we're seeing are essentially a bot that handles the first request from a customer and then triages that request, whether it's to an email department or a support department, whether it's to a sales team, or it could be a specific product team based on what the customer's actually asking. So the bot being a router to other channels, basically. It could be even a live chat channel. We're also I'm seeing mostly artificially intelligent ones, and that's probably because that's the space that we're in and they're the clients that we tend to work with. But there is still a lot of non-artificially intelligent bots out there. These ones are more simple. They're more button or menu driven. They're quite rigid, but they can still be quite effective for initially engaging with a client or a customer or prospect on a website. The last one that we've been most involved in is around connecting to live chat. So in the past few years, we've had a lot of organizations adopting live chat technologies. When I refer to live chat, I mean when somebody's sitting behind a computer chatting to you. So if you have customer service agents, they might be chatting through a web widget on a website to your customers. And this is a live chat. It's a person behind the scenes. What we're starting to see is organizations now saying, hey, Outthought, we would like to be able to automate all of those reoccurring queries that are coming in, and we want a bot to be able to handle those. And if it can't handle those, can you transfer it to a live chat agent? So we're seeing examples of people that have Salesforce live chat, for example, who want to automate all of those frequently asked questions to a bot and then hand off to Salesforce and send the script through to the live chat agent, and lots of other different platforms. So that's definitely one to watch out for or to consider if you already have live chat in your organization. Often people get confused about live chat and virtual assistant in terms of what they're really strong at. So live chat is excellent for handling probably only up to a maximum of 5 calls in parallel. So a person can only really have about that many conversations. The drop-off rates for live chat are still quite high. So they often have, a 20 or 30% rate of people hanging up during the chat because the live chat person can't get back quick enough. But they do have that personal touch. They're really good with complex queries, obviously business hours if it's a support team who's there during the day. But the knowledge often leaves with the employee. Virtual assistants have obviously 24/7 availability. They're going to get better over time. They can handle unlimited threads, and they're basically really good at the repetitive low stuff. So for me, the ultimate is to have those both together. I think they're best together, and each of their pros and cons really complement each other well. So this is definitely one thing to be considering in business, and it's becoming more and more common in organizations to take this path. So some of the common use cases, I guess they're not really all use cases. Some of these are sort of more benefits to think about, but it's thinking about all the different ways. So often people just think about frequently asked question bots, and these are really great, but there's a lot of interesting angles to this. So for example, the ability to personalize a response or a conversation with a user by looking up other system information or knowing more about them when they come in, or in fact remembering them when they next come back. These are all really interesting angles that you can add to a typical virtual assistant. Also being able to lead a new or existing person coming to a website to a particular path. So getting them into your sales funnel, for example, or having some way of contacting them again or keeping that connection with them can be really powerful. Thinking about things like customer service offerings. So we have clients who don't have a 24/7 call desk, but they do have a great outbound call team. So they're thinking about, collecting callback details, for example, in an automated way so that when their staff come on in the morning, they can call back those customers. So there's a lot of different applications. But before we get too much further in, I want to just clarify for those people who may have quite an early and basic knowledge of virtual assistants, I want to clarify what we're talking about today. I often have friends or family get so excited when I tell them that I, design and build and host virtual assistants that they think I'm creating the next Alexa or the next Siri. And they think that I'm building this thing that the whole world is going to be able to use, and it's going to be absolutely everywhere. And that's not really the case. So what we're talking about here are retrieval bots. So at the most simple level, I could at the highest level, I could categorize bots into two main types. You've got retrieval bots, and the next one that I'll cover. So retrieval bots are all about retrieving responses from usually some type of question and answer set or some type of domain knowledge library. They're about a user asking something, interpreting and understanding what that user's asking, and responding to them based on what the bot knows. They do use machine learning. There are certainly retrieval bots that don't, but these type of bots, they do have machine learning. The machine learning is how it basically knows what the user is asking, and it decides based on that how it's going to answer them. But they also tend to have a rule-based element to them, which is where we start to hear about things like conversational flows and conversational design. There is definitely a flow concept or a conversation concept with this bot type, and the response rate generally improves the more and more information and questions are basically digested. And I'll go into a lot more detail on that part later. But basically, retrieval bots are retrieving responses for a user based on what they're asking from a knowledge set, often using machine learning to know how to respond. It is very different from what I call these generative bots. Generative bots are the new frontier of chatbots. They are really awesome. They are really cool. You probably heard about Mina, who was recently released by Google, who is a generative bot. So Mina has, to give you some context, been trained on around 340 gigabytes of social media and publicly available domain information. It uses really large neural networks. it is not retrieving responses. It is actually generating responses on the fly based on its information set. It also uses machine learning, but it uses a very specific type of natural language processing and models in order to make that happen. So what these bots are good at is, right now, they're pretty good at chit chat. You can have a pretty coherent conversation with a good one. They're not the bots that organizations are putting into their company. They're good at chit chat. They would not be good at, for example, asking a specific piece of information and returning a web page that a customer should go to for more information, or answering a specific question in a coherent way. These are literally making up responses on the fly. So if you want a specific response to your customers, these are not the kind of bots that you would be using. They are definitely futuristic, but I think they are going to become more real in the future, and we can certainly use them for things like chit chat. These will not be deployed in enterprises in terms of answering specific questions at the moment. So I guess that leads me on to what VAs are actually capable of. One of the biggest reasons failed projects occur in virtual assistants is that they're usually selected and deployed for a use case that they're not necessarily suited to. So this is about knowing where the technology limitations lie with this technology. So virtual assistants are really good at repetitive inquiries and capturing data points and conversations. They're good at triggering specific actions if you know exactly when to trigger them. And they're good at quite structured and repetitive processes. They're not good at replicating an entire app, for example. So, if a client said, oh, I want this thing to be able to, a chatbot online that can order food for me, yes, it's probably quite possible to do that. And there are examples of chatbots ordering pizza and so on. But the reality of building a chatbot to have all the functions and all the complexity and all the options and all the flows that a food ordering app would have is firstly not cost effective to build, and it's just not going to have the same experience that an app is. So this is about making sure the virtual assistant is used within the correct parameters and the correct use cases. They're also not good at really low volume or low value inquiries. So for example, if a client comes and asks something to a chatbot, you're probably not going to necessarily program that in to your chatbot then for the next time it gets asked. Chatbots are good at repetitive things, and because they're relying on machine learning, we want to make sure we have a really strong correlation between what someone's asking and what answers they're getting. So we tend not to answer one-off things. So this brings me to something that a few people were interested to know, and I guess I'm quite passionate about the realities of this technology. If any of you follow my content on LinkedIn, I'm often posting what's really behind this stuff, and I post it because I'm passionate about organizations being successful with this technology, and I am not passionate about organizations making it seem easier than it is in order to convince organizations to use this technology. So how do they really learn? Well, many of you will be aware of the high-level process of putting a good content together for a virtual assistant. And for those of you that aren't, this is the high-level flow that we follow when we're starting to put together content. So we start at the capture. We're capturing typical interactions. We're capturing, what's the intent of a user? What are they trying to do? And after we've gotten a whole lot of this information, and there's a whole lot of other processes involved in that, we go through and we go and start to test, how is it working? What are the nuances? Are there other things we need to add to drive this a good experience? Really honing in on the content. After that process, we've got a whole normalization process, and that's probably one of the most important parts in building a successful natural language-based virtual assistant that can really understand and respond well to a user. So we have to go through a whole process where the data and the information is normalized. It has to be in really well-defined structures, and this is what helps it become robust and maintainable over time, assuming you follow best practice when you're training it. And I'll go into some of that. This process is really important. Any organization or vendor that tells you you're just going to feed this thing information and it's going to give you the answers is being probably about 6 levels too high in the reality of what needs to happen there. This is the bulk of the time and the effort on a good natural language processing system. And then after all of that, it's basically deployed, and then obviously a whole lot of analysis goes on about what's happening and how to refine it and improve it over time. So that's a very high level about the types of things that need to happen. Virtual assistants are a living, breathing thing. They're like a data warehouse. So you can't just put things in and expect them to be good. They need to be constantly monitored and constantly trained, or otherwise they just become contaminated over time. And we've all heard those stories. Well, I've heard the stories of these large organizations. There's been a number of them now that have had to completely start their virtual assistant again after 1 year because the content management was not done correctly. So this is something that is absolutely foundational to the way Outthought design and deliver these things, and it's something that I'm really passionate about people really learning and understanding more before and asking the questions. So here's a picture of how some people might say they learn. So we've got a user coming in through some device. At number 2, they're asking a question. It gets processed through natural language processing. The bot's going to come back and answer the person. And then in the background, we've got magical learning points 4 and 5. The first magical learning point is that a human is going to help the bot supervise learn. Yes, that is factually correct. And I do heavily think bots need to be supervised learning, to use supervised learning. And then we've got magic point number 5, that the more messages the bot receives, the more the bot improves, called machine learning. So these things are right. The more it receives, the more it learns, but also the more rubbish it receives, the more it learns that too. So for me, absolutely imperative is to have the human in the loop. It has to be supervised learning, and there is a whole lot of best practice that needs to go around that. There are some great applications and platforms out there that say you're just gonna, you're gonna go through every conversation, you're gonna add this and it's gonna just machine learn, and every new thing that comes in from users, you're gonna approve it or not approve it, or you're gonna recategorize it, and it's just gonna keep learning. And that's true to an extent, but there's quite a lot of subtleties and nuances and ifs and buts and exceptions to that. And these are the things that can really make or break a content store for a bot over time. So let's go one level further down. This is sort of, I guess, a more drilled down version of what I've just shown you. We don't follow this exact method. It's pretty good and close explanation to show what the training process involves. But essentially, if we start at number 1, where we're defining intent, so we're collecting what people are saying, we're defining what what we think they're asking, what are the questions. Mapping utterance is just, well, how many different ways are they asking the same question? So if we know people want to know about the weather, which is an intent, we're going to map utterances to that. So what is the weather? Is it cold? Is it hot? What temperature is it? These are all ways of asking what is the weather. And then we're going to create our initial training set. Now, you don't necessarily have to divide them up like that, but you're going to have your training set. It's probably also not going to necessarily be in an Excel spreadsheet. There's lots of different ways of having data stores. But the concept is you're going to have some training data. Then at number 5, you're going to put that training data into some type of a classifier, which is usually like you're going to put it through an NLP model or whatever your NLP engine is, or something that's going to actually classify this information. And then you're going to test it. And you're going to see after that testing, did your bot perform well? Could it answer all those things correctly? Or did it understand those things correctly? Or did it not? And after you get through all that, well, then you're going to have some of the data that you said it did really well, and that's going to now be our trained corpus and what we're going to actually interrogate. And some of it won't be good, so you'll think, okay, well, I'll feed that back in, or I'll have to fix it up a bit and retrain that data. So this is, and then the people interact with the good data, and then new stuff comes in, and then you go through the whole process again. So this is sort of where we're starting to see, okay, well, we've got the human supervised learning here. We've got people deciding what gets retrained, what was good, what wasn't. We've got a machine learning element in here where it's trying its best to start applying its knowledge, and it's creating a model to apply that knowledge, and then we go through the cycle. But again, this is still probably one level higher. There's a whole bunch of other processes that, if you are specializing in content development and content management, that to be aware of. And this is again where if people are saying you just feed it data and it's going to get better, or you're going to have people just add new questions into new groupings, the bot will answer. It is not that simple. So natural language processing brains have a whole lot of things going on. Here just a few streams that I noted down about the types of things that need to be thought about in terms of really making sure a model is solid. So firstly, there's a concept of, if people are asking new questions, we don't want to add all of those new questions at one time, because we need to make sure that they're a regular question before we start adding them. So already there's a situation where we need to separate out what is the new stuff with what is the maybe going to be a new stuff. Which is separate from what is something someone's already asking that I need to add to the stuff I've already got. So already we end up with 3 different things that we need to be doing just when we're starting to get in our new content. On top of that, we're going to start to see new flows, and those will need to be thought about. So in theory, you're going to add all your new utterances to your existing questions. And then in theory, you're going to look at maybe new utterances that are becoming more and more common, that they could become new intents. And then you're going to see new different language that people are using. And then we'll need to create new entities for those. But there's a whole lot of gotchas in these processes. We need to be very careful about not creating overlaps in the model. And this is a really common issue that I am seeing time and time again with organizations coming to us saying, oh my gosh, our bot's just not performing very well. The accuracy is getting worse over time. We've been training it, but there's all these things going wrong. And mostly it's due to these types of things. It's about adding in new utterances and accidentally creating overlaps. So for example, if someone's saying, how is the weather versus what temperature is it in some other country, that is not the same question, but it could easily be mapped accidentally to the same question. And so what ends up happening is your responses over time become blurrier and blurrier and more inaccurate. We also have to be careful that when we're creating new content or questions that people want answers to, we need to make sure that these are all created at the correct level. So if you want a response to can my visitors park here, or can my delivery people park here, that's actually 2 separate answers. So therefore you can't put them in the same intent. Now, when you imagine thousands of conversations coming through and you're blending new content with existing content, with creating new content and ensuring that there's no overlaps, this becomes a really specialized and tricky thing to manage. And so this is an area that I think people need to really get educated on and really care about and really think about, and not just assume that all the tools in the marketplace are doing all of this, because they're not. It requires humans to be involved in certain places. And then, of course, we get to back testing all of the content. So I guess this leads me to what I think successful virtual assistants have, and what are the ingredients to making sure they're successful. and obviously this is at a high level. I could talk for days about why they are and aren't successful. At the core of it, I think there's three main areas that we need to cover. So an organisation who's thinking about this technology, they should definitely be considering the domain expertise in their business. So normally if a business wants to go and do, let's say it's an insurance provider, they want to do a virtual assistant, they will need to make sure that there's subject matter experts on that material that they want to help answer for their customers, specifically to their business. A lot of times we see projects where IT is doing the virtual assistant and they're not involving business, or business are just not, I guess, put on the project to the capacity that they really need to be to have a successful outcome. The second is, and obviously having their buy-in is really important. Along with that, the correct use case needs to be selected. There's been a number of use cases that are not ideal, and they're sort of, I guess, pushing a technology into a corner that it shouldn't be in. And obviously having the correct team and technology. The technology stuff is really important. I often get organizations asking me, well, what's the best platform? Is it Watson? Is it Amazon? Is it Microsoft? Oracle? Is it Oracle's platform? There are so many different platforms out there, and they are not all equal, and they are all require different work depending on which one you choose. And there are lots of shortcuts for some of them if you know what those are. But in general, the technology and team are really important. The virtual assistant expertise, obviously that's what I do and what Outthought do, and look, there's other organisations out there too. It's really important to have experts in virtual assistants. There is a whole lot of domain knowledge and expertise that come with these developing these solutions, and I would highly encourage organisations, even if they're a large organisation, to partner with teams who have expertise in these systems, because often large organizations will see, oh, I need a UX designer, a conversational designer, I need, someone to get the existing content, I need to build the content, but they don't really think about what the life cycle looks like and how to maintain it over time and what's the best way to approach it. I think these things are really imperative to all bring these things together in order to have a good outcome. So I also got asked about testing and what do I need to think about when testing. And actually someone also asked me about testing automation and why and how we're finding that. So we use automated testing for our customer implementations. A lot of organizations think that testing a bot is mainly down to, can it answer the questions? Did it answer the questions accurately, and did my customer get what they wanted? And that's a good thing to start testing, I guess, initially. Obviously, if they've got integrations with other things, they're thinking about testing that too. But for me, there's a whole bunch of other things that you need to think about in terms of testing a virtual assistant. So onboarding is around testing how a user first interacts with that bot and really monitoring and checking that users are understanding from the get-go what the bot's there to do. How are they interacting with it? It could even be as simple as testing how they send a message. So we've been delivering a number of digital humans lately, and one of the first things we realized was people actually weren't quite sure how to interact. And so testing these things is really important for a successful outcome. Understanding is about the one that people often overlook. Understanding is about, how is the bot understanding the user? Is the bot understanding and interpreting the small talk? Is it understanding their requests and questions that they're asking? And basically what level of things can it understand that it needs to be able to. So for these types of things, we use automated testing. We're feeding literally thousands of examples and going and evaluating the results and the accuracy of those results. And we do the same with answering. So answering is about how well is the bot answering? Are they answering accurately? Are they pulling out the correct response for what the person's asking? Is it being answered in the correct context of the conversation? So understanding and answering are probably two of the main high volume types of testing. Navigation is an interesting one as well. Navigation is about how easily is it easy to get through the conversation. So are people getting stuck in certain places they shouldn't? If they are getting stuck, how are we handling that? Navigation, we need to run through different flows, different combinations, and seeing, this is like quite an important one through user testing to see with blind users, not using the development team to test it and wonder why they aren't getting the real, I guess, insight into what everyone's doing. Error management is not, I've probably chosen the wrong word there. Error is more about how is it handling unintended paths. So if a user kind of gets to a dead end or the user gets stuck, how well does the virtual assistant recover from that? And also intelligence. Intelligence for me, it's kind of an interesting one to test, but it's also sort of optional depending on the sophistication of virtual assistant that your organization is trying to do. Has it got any intelligence? Can it remember a user? Is it recalling information about that user correctly? Is it recalling information or using the context correctly in terms of its conversation? That's another interesting one to test as well. And so, yeah, I mean, look, I can't go into a lot of detail on all of these topics, but I did want to give you some idea about the types of things that we're thinking about when we're doing these projects for our customers. So what about being data ready? Someone asked me about, can I talk about data readiness? Do I have to have data before I start my chatbot or virtual assistant project? What do I need to do there? So the typical scenario here is company X builds a bot, the development team and the testing team internally test it, and then they launch it to their customers, and their customers don't interact with it how they were hoping. So this usually comes back to a data readiness exercise that might not have been done, or perhaps an approach that was done before maybe a few important steps were taken. So data readiness is not just about having your data. It is not just about going out and saying, I've got my FAQ list, I'm ready to start now. It's actually, you really need to think through. Data readiness is probably more about thinking through things than actually data at the early stages of these projects. So you need to think about what questions are you going to need to be able to answer. What are your customers, or who are the people engaging with this, and what kind of stuff are you going to need to be able to answer? Do you have access to the information? Sometimes the information is sitting in a call center or another department that you may have to go through 6 months of paperwork to get access to. There can often be gaps in that data. Is there personally identifiable information in that data that's going to mean your organization or your department or another process will need to be gone through before you can have access to that? What type of volumes of data are you going to need? If you're thinking about answering 80% of your frequently asked questions from the get-go, you're probably going to need a pretty big data set to support that in terms of what those questions are and how people are typically asking them. So do you actually even have the volumes of data that you're going to need? And are they the correct type of data? Different data sets are good for different things, just like in any AI project. Virtual assistants are the same. So an example of data inputs that you might need and ones that are different, and why some are more useful than others. So what's most important if you're doing the type of virtual assistant that's going to need to understand what your customers are asking you? You need language and data in the voice of your customer. Often organizations try to make a pretty good stab at guessing how their customers are going to interact, but these are inevitably the ones that when real customers come to interact, the bot just doesn't understand what's being asked because it's been trained, and the model has been trained on how other people think customers will ask. So for example, I've done some work recently in an insurance company, and the way that the insurance company was saying, oh, people are going to come and ask about this product name. It's actually not. The way customers are actually asking about that are, what is my this X cover? They're not asking about it in the way the insurance company thinks they are in terms of the product names. So how can you get the inputs you'll need? A lot of stuff will often reside in call center logs. That could be phone calls. You would need to transpose those somehow. There's software to do that, or you can often find them in other logs. There's other logs or data stores of these call center. These are really useful to hear how customers are asking about things and talking about things. You can also collect these off support staff. So we had a project recently where the client actually didn't have very much of this data at all. So we ran a mini project 2 weeks before where the support staff literally jotted down every single question that they were getting asked. And when you've got a whole bunch of people, 40 people doing that all day, you start to create a really great source of that data for an organization that didn't already have it. Web search data, we have had to resort to that once. Web search data is really useful for understanding the high-level categories about what people are going to ask. It is not useful for understanding the voice in how they're going to ask, because when people search in the web, they're like, 4-person tent. They tend to search in keywords and short, strange, abstract sentences. When they're chatting, they use very different language. So web search can be useful for overall topics, but not voice of customer. Web chat logs are excellent. We've used live chat logs recently really effectively. And worst case, you can physically sit in the call center if that's the type of chatbot you're doing, and start data collecting. So you might actually have to do a mini project before your virtual assistant. Also, I encourage people to think about being data ready. It's not just thinking about the information you're inputting into your system. It's actually also the data that you're going to be getting out of your system. So think about what you're going to do with the data. Are you going to inform a business process, or are you going to use it to collect new content? Are you trying to collect metrics off your users that you're going to report on in your business? And think about how you're going to feed it into existing data sets or your business. What are you actually going to do with all this interaction data? And do you need to collect specific interaction data for it to be useful? So where to start with conversational design? All right, this is a huge topic just on its own. So I'm going to give you the high-level steps that Outthought go through. But obviously, if you're interested in any of these topics, you can go and research. Each one is its own entire knowledge domain. So we always start by defining the user. Who is the user that's going to be interacting? Is it a 60-year-old person who is going to have a certain way of needing things, and so on? Who is the user? Often the personas are defined already by the organization you're working with. They already often know who their users are. So that's a great place to start. Then you need to think about what their goals are. What situations have triggered them to come and talk to the bot? What's the context of why they're there? Are they coming to it because they need support and help and they're frustrated? All of these things are things to think about. Then we define the user journey. So that's, what are they trying to accomplish? What are they trying to achieve during that conversation? Then we start to define the role and type of virtual assistant. This is really important. If you define user journeys and then go and select a virtual assistant that can't actually do half of what those journeys are, well, then that's probably not a good place to start. So you need to understand the technical limitations of the virtual assistant technologies out there. What's the level of effort required to build out what you think your user journeys are going to be? And what's your timeline and budget? These are really important things, because often if these things are constrained by technology or budget or timeline, then you'll often need to go back and visit potentially a less ambitious version of what you're trying to do. The persona of the virtual assistant's really important. So this is like, what's its personality, its tone, what languages are going to use. And the conversational flow, this is probably the most difficult, the most time consuming, and the most difficult part for organizations to get right. This is an example of a conversational flow. This is a pretty basic one. Conversational flows are essentially mapping out what these sort of user paths are. And one of the things that's mostly overlooked in conversational flows, and you will often see this when you interact with different bots out there, is that they will have a whole lot of dead ends. So they'll leave a user hanging, or the user won't be able to answer, or answers in a different way than the bot expects. And then what happens is that user has nowhere to go, and the bot has nowhere to take them, and the whole experience is just terrible. So these are the things that we need to iron out in conversational design. Conversational design in itself is a very specialized area to get done well, particularly with natural language processing bots that can often jump off the path at any time if you wanted to, and to manage that user continuing what they need to be able to do. And then finally, we start writing the fun part, the scripts, and how the bot's actually going to talk in the user, which starts to bring all those things together. So that's a high-level view of the flow that we would go through during conversational design. Okay, this was an interesting one. Should I use a customer engagement chatbot, or should I integrate a best-of-breed chatbot into my customer engagement platform? So a customer engagement platform is a platform that can do lots of these things. Sometimes it can do one or two of these things. Sometimes it can do all of these things. But customer engagement platforms are things like Salesforce, like a CRM tool, a NetSuite, maybe like a Zoho or a Zendesk Sell. And they often have elements of these things. So the question is, should I use my CRM, let's take Salesforce as an example, to do my virtual assistant conversations, or should I use a very specialized virtual assistant technology and then integrate it with my CRM or my customer engagement platform? Well, there's a couple of things to decide there. First and foremost, for me, it always comes down to what is it that you're trying to do. If you want a bot that's just going to look up a couple of customer details when they ask for their account number or their balance, well, then you probably would just use one that's integrated already if there's an automated bot that can do that. But if you start to need a bot that has sophisticated conversational abilities, that it can have a lower requirement of training for things like natural language processing, it's got a high quality conversational experience. You might need to extend it to do other things like trigger off an email, or maybe go and search a document repository to come back with an answer if it can't answer. These are all scenarios where it would be wise to probably think about building a specialized virtual assistant, because these are they're much less bound in their constraints than they're the master of chatbot technology, right? So it's like, well, if you want the sort of low level version, then it probably makes sense just to use the inbuilt one. As soon as you're going to get extended beyond that, then it's better to think about doing it, I guess, in a more robust way. The other thing to consider that I mentioned before is about that content management. A lot of these inbuilt systems that are coming on a customer engagement platform, they don't have all of the sophistication of content management. They don't have any of that stuff in them. And that stuff is what makes a good conversational or natural language processing bot. And the other thing will come down to, well, what skills have you got in-house? A lot of these will need to be custom extended to handle some of the more specialized features of a true conversational assistant. So there's a lot of things to think about there. We're in the middle of an implementation right now where we've been asked to create and automate a live chat system that's connected to Salesforce, and they've decided to basically use our platform to automate all of the bot responses and then hand off to the Salesforce live agent, and we can transfer all the scripts and all of the information into Salesforce, so they're going to have this single view of what's happening. But it's, the requirements of what are needed often need to extend past that particular platform. So I'm going to show you a quick demo now before we go into question time. This was a really exciting project that we did with a customer in Melbourne who approached us to design and deliver and host all of the conversational content, abilities and integrations to create the world's first digital artificial intelligence concierge. So this concierge is at the front of a building, a big apartment block in Melbourne, and we used the unique digital human platform, which is basically what you see. It's the visual components, it's the face, the UI side of things, the moving avatar and the talking. We basically use that along with our Outthought virtual assistant platform, which is what's hosting all the conversational content, the building integrations, all of the domain knowledge base, all her questions and responses. There's over 1,500 there now. And she was able to handle 100 deliveries in the 2 weeks before Christmas. So imagine that you're outside of this building, you're a delivery driver, the sliding doors on the apartment building are locked, and you need to get in to drop off your delivery. This is a really big problem in apartments right now. They're having to dump things at the front of packages, or residents are having to be home. And so this is a quick demo where I'm walking through accepting a delivery with the digital AI concierge. Now, I wanted to show you this because it's a really interesting use case of an example of a technology company that's come to us. They said, we want to do this cool stuff. We don't want to build out all the tech foundation from scratch. You guys do the tech side, and we're going to have this amazing product at the end of it that they're now going to be taking to market. So it's a good example to think outside the box. It's the future of virtual assistants. They're not all going to be web chats. A lot of the ones that we do are, and they're excellent too. But this is just a new thing I thought I'd show you. I'm just going to caveat, there is a little bit of a delay because this was filmed over the web, and the actual assistant is in Melbourne on a kiosk. So it's a little bit slow to respond. That's not representative of the experience when you're there on site.
Firstly, let me know the apartment number you are delivering to, and I will call the intercom to see if the resident is home. You can either enter it on screen or tell me by pushing the talk button.
Hi, it's apartment 112. So the intercom is ringing now, and we can't hear the intercom because we're not in Melbourne.
No one's picking up the intercom. What are my delivery options? Please let me know the type of item you are trying to deliver, and then I can direct you to the right place. I have a letter here. Just a letter. Letters and other small items can be left in the apartment mailboxes.
So at this time, she's opened the doors and I've gone in to drop off my delivery. And she's also sent the apartment owner of 112 a text message. So this is a really cool example of, you know, if you think about all those design things that I went through, there is a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be thought through in terms of delivering these things successfully. So how can you get started? There's all kinds of people on this call. We've got consultants, we've got tech people, we've got clients. How can you get started? Well, firstly, if you're considering virtual assistant adoption, I would definitely encourage you to educate yourselves further. I have a whole lot of information on my LinkedIn. Make sure you connect. I accept all the connections, or follow if you want to keep up with the latest, and go through my profile. There are heaps of videos on there on more and more of these topics, different topics to today, particularly for people that are new to that space. I would definitely encourage you to reach out to us. So Outthought are experts in this, in delivering these systems, in designing them, in hosting them. I would definitely encourage you to reach out if you're not sure where to start, or you want to work through your use cases and basically work out how you can best use this technology in your organisation. And also I would encourage those of you, we have a number of partners based in Australia and New Zealand that partner with us to accelerate. And what that means is we've got solution providers who have nothing to do with AI, who want to get into the AI space, and they come to us and say, we want to use your platform so that we can build out these things, or we want to create a solution so we can package up and sell it, or we don't want to build out a whole tech stack, which is, you know, usually required to do a virtual assistant. It's not as simple as getting IBM Watson or IBM Amazon and having a fully fledged enterprise quality virtual assistant. There are lots of moving parts that need to be built out, and applications and middleware that need to be completed. We've already got all of that stuff ready to go. So we can literally have a virtual assistant created and deployed without having to build all the foundations out. So this is something that we do with consultants who are trying to get into this space, consulting firms, tech companies. The one that I just showed you was a development company. They wanted to have a product to take to market but didn't want to build out all the tech stack to do it. So yeah, there's lots of different ways to get started, but definitely don't hesitate to reach out. We now have, there's my details. So connect or follow me on LinkedIn. Also connect and follow Outthought AI Assistants if you want to see more content and all the latest and greatest that's being deployed. You can email me or call me. And I'm now going to go to the chat because we've got 5 minutes left for questions. And I'm going to go and look in this QA. Lots of hellos. Let me just do a quick scan first. Given the importance of data readiness, overlapped intensive. Okay, so one of the questions here, given the importance of data readiness, in your experience, a privacy-sensitive domain is simply going to be too hard to address with a VA and chatbot approach? Thanks, Tirath. My answer is no. There are two privacy things to think about here. One of them is the actual data set. We have to work with large data sets that have private information in them, but we don't use the private information when we're building and training our model. We are ignoring the people's names and account numbers, for example, and we are using that to form up what the domain knowledge needs to have, but we're not explicitly reusing any of the private information. So in that regard, no, I don't think it's a limitation. In terms of chatbots that are asking for privacy or collecting private information, that is another whole topic to discuss. There are definitely ways around that. Most organizations out there are either doing this in an authenticated environment, so it doesn't matter if the information is given out, or they are putting a disclaimer on the chatbot to ask people, do not give private information. I hope that helps answer your question. We've got 123 chats here. Let me just have a quick scan. A lot of hellos, mutes, hello, no sound. Oh my goodness, I hope everyone was listening. Impressive profile, thank you. Hello, hello, happy Thursday to ACS people. Hi ACS people for joining. I think there's some public, the PowerPoint will be available to everybody. And also I will make some of this available online as well. Sorry for being late, that's okay, Mark. Maybe it will be recorded as well. So I think some of you can, some of you can access the recording as well if there's anything that you wanted to re-go over. A lot of people saying yes, yes, yes. I don't know what that's talking about. I'm going to ignore the yeses unless there was a question. Yeah, something. Please say yes if you can hear. Oh, nothing personal, but please don't try to be over smart. Okay, sorry about that. I'm not sure that I was trying to be over smart, but hopefully it was. If you feel that you weren't keeping up with something or you wanted me to re-explain something, I'm more than happy for you to reach out to me. I do tend to go quite quickly, so I'm sorry if anyone felt like maybe they weren't able to keep up. What else have we got? Hi, everyone. Just a short comment on the error management. Do you mean in case exception handling? So yes, this question was regarding when we're doing a testing, when we're testing for error management, we are looking for exceptions. How are we handling, for example, not understanding something someone has said, somebody getting frustrated, somebody clicking an option and then trying to go somewhere else we've not allowed the bot to go. Answered the VA one. Cool example, great example. Great presentation. Thanks, Lisa. Understanding partially why AI can be fooled by image foolers or text foolers. So what I'm talking about now, I'm not talking about the bots. So this is talking about bots that are you know, people writing nasty things and the bot suddenly starts being nasty. Those bots are very specific machine learning bots. They are unsupervised. They are literally taking everything someone's saying and using it in the model. I absolutely do not I do not believe that people should be implementing those type of bots. They're just high risk, and I certainly wouldn't be putting one in my business. We only build supervised learning bots, but you might be referring to Microsoft Tay, the one that went wild a few years ago. Lots of thank yous. I'm so glad that you've learnt something. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. Good presentation. Great session. Thank you for answering parts of my ethics problem. High risk of security. I'm not sure which part you would, as your example at Melbourne, there can be a high risk of security, which can be expensive. Oh, what's the difference between a chatbot and traditional information retrieval applications like web search? That's an interesting question. A web search does retrieve information. It often uses things like keywords. It often will tend to retrieve, for example, a whole entire page rather than a specific answer and help someone with the next step. So yeah, a web search is specific about just looking up something with a keyword usually, not understanding the intent of what someone's asking. Thank you for a good session. I want to see if you're seeing, oh, this is from Simon Grieve. Hi, hey, Simon. So Simon is from our partners at Unique. They make amazing digital human real-life technology. He's asking whether we're seeing an actual value in FAQ in terms of ROI and how your customers are tracking this, or whether this is simply a baseline to the corpus, like a training or call center agent, and customers are quickly looking for the next use case that builds value. That is a really good question. I believe customers, I don't think that a lot of organizations say use FAQ assistance, it's going to save you money. To date, my experience is I have not seen anybody actually lose their jobs or cut staff by using FAQ assistance, which for me, I don't think it directly translates to ROI in that way. What I do think it translates to is better customer service, because they're now able to answer questions all day and all night, or have somebody be able to get back to them. I think it's allowing organizations and those contact center people to focus on more complex conversations and high level interactions and high value interactions, rather than all of the bottom line stuff that they've been answering every day. But I think a lot of organizations aren't just adopting this for ROI. They're doing it to get a better customer experience. They're doing it to get better engagement with their customers. They're doing it to listen to their customers and serve their customers and compete against their competition with customer service. So that's a really good question, Simon. I feel like we could actually do a whole topic just on that side of it. Thank you. I learned a lot. I'm so glad when people learn. Oh, there's so many good questions here. I feel like I need to start a new blog to answer them all. What is a guarantee that information will not be used for something else? That's a good ethics question, Abdul. Look, organizations are going to, it depends what you mean by something else. Conversational data is usually in the forms of questions and answers or thoughts and opinions. You know, if a client uses that to better serve their customers, great. If they have some more sinister for purpose for using that, it's probably not going to go down very well with their customers, and is probably going to be very good for their client base. Sorry, I'm trying to talk and read at the same time. What else? Good presentation, thank you. Please send a copy. Yeah, the information will be, if you want a copy of the presentation, please email Janelle bushby@acs.org. That is not going to help you because I do not have I'm not going to spell that out now. No, it's not easy to copy. I'm pasting it on my slides so you can see it. Okay, so just email that email address I've just put under the thing if you want the slides. She will email them out to you all. Thank you, lots of thank yous. Overlapped intents are usually those that still need to be triaged further down to the actual intent, thoughts. That's interesting, maybe not. Overlapped intents can happen because organisations aren't necessarily segregating the information correctly. It's not always because a user needs to disambiguate their question. So I think, yeah, in some cases, yes, in some cases, no. I'll probably answer one more question, then we probably need to wrap up. Oh, this is an interesting one. Is there a particular programming language you recommend we learn to start in the field? I would, look, there are 1,000 million ways to build bots. We use a combination of IBM Watson Assistant for the natural language processing and the Outthought virtual assistant platform to handle all the middleware. I wouldn't suggest you go and build out an entire bot end to end in that way. I would suggest you think about using platforms that are going to allow you to deploy that more easily. Yeah, I think you need to decide on your own. I don't recommend any particular language in terms of writing one from scratch. What software am I using to train the data set? We use our own software, so we've written software that can train and basically do all the testing. We're using the Watson Assistant natural language processing as the actual engine. But we've written all of the smarts to be able to do that. Okay, I think that's probably all. I think I've pretty much got to most of them. Lots of thank you. Sorry guys, I know you can't see the questions. They're in my chat, so I can't share them. So that's all from me. Please connect to me on LinkedIn or email, not email. Well, you can email me if you've got something specific. But if you want to follow more information, then please add me on Outthought AI Assistants. Otherwise, I'll hand back to ACS for any final wrap up.